The Kepler nexus glowed in the void of space, a massive battle station sitting at the center of a vast network of stars that had been contested between the Zephyrian Collective and the Vraxian Imperium for nearly 5 centuries. Its segmented hull shimmered with defensive barriers, bioluminescent warning patterns pulsing along its equator where ships from both alien civilizations docked in their respective sectors, meticulously distanced according to Galactic Convention protocols. Captain Dylan Fletcher of the Earth Federation stood at the viewport of the diplomatic shuttle, watching as their vessel approached the battle station. His reflection showed a weathered face with determined eyes, a man in his 40s who had seen too much diplomacy fail and too many unnecessary conflicts continue. "Tell me again why we're getting involved in a war that's been going on since before humans left their solar system," he asked, not turning from the view. Lieutenant Commander Alex Reeves looked up from her data terminal, the blue light illuminating her dark complexion. "Because they asked us to, sir. After 473 years of fighting, both sides finally agreed that an outside mediator might help resolve their conflict." 473 years, Fletcher muttered, shaking his head. "Most human civilizations don't last that long, let alone their wars." Reeves adjusted her uniform collar, the Silver Federation insignia catching the light. "The galactic conventions of civilized warfare have kept casualties remarkably low. Their battles are more like choreographed performances than actual combat." "War ballet," Fletcher snorted. "Great." "The diplomatic brief is interesting," Reeves continued. "Every engagement follows strict protocols, pre-announced times, symmetrical fleet compositions, regulated weapons yields. It's all very orderly." Fletcher turned from the viewport with a wry smile. "War isn't supposed to be orderly, Reeves. It's supposed to be hell so that people want to avoid it." The shuttle docked with a gentle thud, and Fletcher straightened his uniform. "Well, let's go meet our dancers." The reception chamber aboard the Kepler Nexus was a study in compromise. The room was perfectly circular, with exactly half decorated in Zephyrian motifs, crystalline structures that refracted light in complex, meaningful patterns, and the other half in Vraxian designs of flowing, organic shapes that seemed to pulse with the station's artificial gravity cycles. The dividing line between the two aesthetics was so precise, it might have been measured by laser. Ambassador Veltar of the Zephyrian Collective stood exactly 3.7 meters from the dividing line. As dictated by convention, the ambassador's body was humanoid, but impossibly slender, with skin that seemed to shift colors subtly as they moved. 4 upper limbs were arranged in precise symmetry, and their head housed 7 eyes, arranged in a pattern that humans found disorienting. Across the room, High Commander Zixith represented the Vraxian Imperium, standing an identical 3.7 meters from the dividing line. The Vraxian was broader, with a carapace of interlocking plates that rippled with bioluminescent patterns. Their 2 primary arms ended in appendages that resembled both hands and weapons, while secondary limbs protruded from their midsection, constantly in motion, as if sampling the air. Fletcher and Reeves were guided to the exact center of the room, where a small neutral zone had been established. "Captain Fletcher," Ambassador Veltar's voice was melodic, each syllable precisely formed. "The Zephyrian Collective welcomes your intervention as permitted under Convention Statute 47.3, Paragraph 11, Subclause Delta, regarding third-party mediation. High Commander Zixith acknowledges the Federation representative's arrival." The Vraxian's voice rasped through translator nodes. "As agreed in the 92nd Amendment to the Rules of Engagement, Section 1138, Paragraph 9, with all appropriate ceremonial recognition." Fletcher nodded politely, but Reeves could see the tension in his jaw. He hated excessive formality. "Thank you both for the warm welcome," Fletcher said. "The Federation is honored to assist in resolving this situation." Veltar's 7 eyes blinked in a complex pattern. We appreciate your diplomatic phrasing, Captain, but there is no situation to resolve. The Zephyrian Collective and Vraxian Imperium are engaged in sanctioned, regulated conflict as outlined in the Galactic Conventions of Civilized Warfare. Fletcher finished. Yes, I've read the brief. But with all due respect, Ambassador, wars are generally fought to be won, not to be sustained for half a millennium. A ripple of what might have been discomfort passed through Zixith's bioluminescent patterns. Captain Fletcher, perhaps you misunderstand. Our conflict follows the ancient traditions established to prevent the kind of devastating total wars that scarred many worlds before the conventions. Fletcher looked between the two alien representatives, then asked the question that would change everything. What do you actually want? The room went silent. Reeves held her breath, recognizing the bluntness typical of her captain, cutting through layers of diplomacy. Both alien representatives stood perfectly still, their body language indecipherable to human eyes. I'm sorry, Veltar finally said, but I don't understand the question. It's simple, Fletcher said. What is the objective of this war? What are you fighting for? What does victory look like for either of you? Zixith's secondary limbs moved in agitation. We fight for the control of the Kepler Nexus and its surrounding territories, as has been established since the initial declaration of hostilities in Earth year 1914. Fletcher nodded. And what makes this territory so valuable that you've fought over it for nearly 5 centuries? The aliens exchanged glances, a remarkably human gesture that suggested this question wasn't covered in their diplomatic protocols. The strategic value is significant, Veltar stated, but the hesitation was noticeable. I'd like Lieutenant Commander Reeves to review the tactical history of this conflict, Fletcher said. Meanwhile, I suggest we adjourn to allow both parties to prepare detailed briefings on their specific objectives and desired outcomes. As they left the chamber, Reeves leaned toward Fletcher. Sir, I think you just violated about 17 diplomatic protocols. Fletcher grinned. Good, because I have a feeling no one's asked them that question in 473 years. Back in their assigned quarters, Reeves pored over the conflict records, while Fletcher paced the room. This is unbelievable, Reeves muttered, scrolling through battle reports. Look at these engagement statistics. Average casualty rate per battle, 0.05%. Damage to capital ships, minimal and always symmetrical. Every fleet configuration is mirrored exactly. If the Zephyrians deploy 7 cruisers and 3 carriers, the Vraxians respond with 7 cruisers and 3 carriers. Fletcher leaned over her shoulder. It's not war, it's choreography. There's more, Reeves continued. Battle schedules are set years in advance. Look, they've already planned engagements through 2394, complete with force compositions and battlefield coordinates. What about territory changes? Surely in 473 years the front lines have moved? Reeves pulled up a series of territorial maps and overlaid them in chronological order. The borders between Zephyrian and Vraxian space pulsed slightly, expanding and contracting by minimal margins. But the overall configuration remained remarkably stable. It's like watching a tide, Fletcher mused. In and out, but never really going anywhere. This is fascinating, Reeves said, her voice dropping to a whisper. According to these records, no new tactical maneuvers have been introduced in over 200 years. Both sides follow the same doctrines, counter the same ways, and achieve the same results. Fletcher dropped into a chair. They're trapped. They've built such elaborate rules around fighting that they've forgotten how to end it. Or why they're fighting in the first place, Reeves added. Fletcher stared at the ceiling. Find me a loophole. Alex, there has to be something in all those protocols and conventions that we can use. For 3 days, Reeves immersed herself in the labyrinthine galactic conventions, while Fletcher engaged in increasingly frustrating formal meetings with both alien delegations. The humans quickly learned that direct questions about objectives were met with recitations from ancient treaties, and suggestions of compromise were countered with references to honor-bound duties. On the fourth day, Fletcher entered their quarters to find Reeves surrounded by holographic displays, her eyes red from lack of sleep. "Tell me you found something," he said. Reeves smiled wearily. "I did. Section 94-276, subsection Theta, paragraph 47 of the amended conventions. In instances where conventional engagement protocols have failed to produce substantial territorial or objective resolution within a period exceeding 450 standard years, alternative resolution methods may be proposed by certified neutral mediators." Fletcher's eyes lit up. "That's us!" "There's more," Reeves said. "The provision has never been invoked because no conflict under the conventions has ever lasted this long. We're in uncharted diplomatic territory. What qualifies as an alternative resolution method?" "That's the beauty of it," Reeves grinned. "It doesn't specify. The provision was written as a failsafe, a recognition that if a conflict went on this long, something had fundamentally failed in the system." Fletcher clapped her hands together. "We have our opening. Now we just need to come up with an alternative that both sides might accept." The next morning, Fletcher presented his proposal in the neutral chamber. Both Veltar and Zixith listened with increasing agitation as he outlined his plan. "A decisive engagement," Fletcher explained. "One battle. Winner takes all. Equal fleet compositions. Fought without the constraints of traditional formations. The Federation will observe to ensure fairness, but will not interfere." "This is outrageous." Veltar's skin pulsed with agitation. "The conventions exist to prevent exactly this kind of unpredictable, potentially devastating confrontation." Zixith's carapace plates clicked rhythmically. "I must concur with the ambassador. What you propose would risk ships and lives in a manner contrary to civilized warfare." "With respect," Fletcher countered, "what exactly is civilized about a war that's lasted 473 years? The provision exists because your ancestors recognized that if a conflict went on this long, the system itself had failed." "The system has not failed," Veltar insisted. "It has prevented the kind of total war that devastated galaxies before the conventions." "At what cost?" Fletcher challenged. "Your societies have been locked in a state of perpetual conflict for generations. Resources that could advance your civilizations are poured into maintaining this elaborate dance. And for what? Territory that barely changes hands?" A tense silence filled the chamber. Finally, Zixith spoke. "This would require extensive consultation with the Imperial Council." "As would any deviation from established protocol," Veltar added. Fletcher nodded. "Of course. Take the time you need. But remember, you invited the Federation to mediate precisely because 473 years of protocol hasn't resolved anything." As the aliens departed, Reeves approached Fletcher. "Do you think they'll agree?" "They have to," Fletcher said quietly. "Because I also found something in their public broadcasts. Their populations are growing restless. This endless war has become so ritualized that it's lost meaning. But neither leadership wants to be the first to suggest ending it." "We're giving them a way out," Reeves realized. "Exactly. A final, glorious battle that one side can definitively win, or both sides can claim they won, depending on how things go." The deliberations took another 3 days. During that time, Fletcher and Reeves were granted unprecedented access to battle records and tactical analyses from both sides. What they found confirmed their suspicions. The war had evolved into a performance, a ritual that satisfied cultural expectations of conflict without the true cost or purpose of warfare. On the 7th day of their mission, both delegations requested a joint meeting. "The Zephyrian Collective has consulted the Council of Symmetry," Veltar announced. "We will accept the Federation's proposal for a decisive engagement with certain conditions." "The Vraxian Imperium likewise accepts," Zixith stated. With the same conditions. Fletcher nodded. Name your conditions. The aliens spoke almost in unison, listing identical requirements: equal fleet sizes, neutral battlefield coordinates, specified weapons loadouts, and a complex scoring system to determine the victor. Fletcher held up a hand. I accept the equal fleet sizes and neutral coordinates, but the rest contradicts the purpose of this engagement. The winner will be determined by one factor only: which side achieves its military objective. And what objective would that be? Veltar asked cautiously. That's for you to decide, Fletcher replied. But it must be clear, achievable, and agreed upon by both sides before the battle begins. The aliens conferred privately, their translators disabled. Fletcher could see the tension in their postures, the weight of centuries of tradition bearing down on this moment of potential change. Finally, they turned back. We propose the following objective, Zixith said. The side that maintains control of the battlefield after the opposing force withdraws or is neutralized shall be declared victor, and shall receive sovereignty over the Kepler Nexus, Veltar added. Fletcher nodded. Agreed. The battle will take place in 3 days. Each side will commit 20 capital ships and their escorts, composition to be determined by your respective commands. As they left the chamber, Reeves whispered to Fletcher, They agreed more easily than I expected. They both think they can win, Fletcher replied. After centuries of stalemate, the possibility of a clear victory is too tempting to resist. What Fletcher didn't share was his suspicion that neither side remembered how to fight a battle that wasn't choreographed. That would be their advantage. The preparations for the decisive engagement transformed the Kepler Nexus. Both Zephyrian and Vraxian forces mobilized with unprecedented energy, their ships maneuvering into position with none of the ceremonial precision that had characterized their previous encounters. There was a palpable tension in the communications, a mixture of uncertainty and excitement. Fletcher and Reeves established their observation post aboard the Federation diplomatic vessel, positioned at a safe distance from the designated battlefield, a region of space between two uninhabited star systems. Both fleets are in position, Reeves reported, studying the tactical display. 20 capital ships each, with support vessels. Identical compositions, as expected. Fletcher nodded, watching as the fleets arranged themselves in their traditional opposing formations, perfectly symmetrical, like pieces on a chessboard. Time to shake things up, he said quietly. He opened a secure channel to both fleets, his voice reaching the command centers of all 40 capital ships simultaneously. This is Captain Dylan Fletcher of the Earth Federation. As the designated neutral observer for this engagement, I remind all commanders that this battle will determine control of the Kepler Nexus once and for all. The traditional rules of engagement have been suspended for this decisive conflict. Your objective is simple: maintain control of this sector after your opponent withdraws or is neutralized. The battle begins now. He cut the transmission and turned to Reeves. Now we wait. The initial exchanges were tentative, both fleets launching long-range attacks that followed familiar patterns. Energy weapons flashed across the void, most intercepted by defensive systems that had been calibrated over centuries to counter exactly such attacks. They're still fighting the old way, Reeves observed after an hour of minimal damage. Fletcher nodded. Time for Phase 2. He opened secure, private channels to selected ship commanders on both sides, the youngest captains, those whose tactical reviews showed glimpses of creativity constrained by protocol. To a Zephyrian cruiser captain, the conventions no longer apply. You're fighting to win, not to look good. To a Vraxian destroyer commander, your ancestors developed those formation protocols to counter enemies from 5 centuries ago. What would work today? The effect wasn't immediate, but by the 3rd hour, subtle changes appeared in the battle. A trio of Vraxian cruisers broke from their traditional swarm pattern, executing a flanking maneuver that caught a Zephyrian dreadnought exposed. The Zephyrians responded by dispersing their fighter screens in an asymmetrical pattern that confused Vraxian targeting systems. "It's working," Reeves whispered, watching as the perfect symmetry of the battlefield dissolved into genuine tactical maneuvers. "They're actually fighting," Fletcher nodded, his expression grim. "And now they remember why the conventions were created in the first place." The battle intensified dramatically in the fourth hour. Freed from centuries of constraint, both sides began to innovate rapidly. Vraxian ships activated dormant weapon systems that disrupted the Zephyrians' crystalline defensive matrices. The Zephyrians responded by reconfiguring their energy distribution networks to create localized space-time distortions that confused Vraxian sensors. Ships began to fall. A Zephyrian carrier erupted in a cascade of light as its power core breached. 3 Vraxian destroyers spiraled out of control, their biomechanical systems failing under concentrated attack. The elegant dance had become a desperate struggle. "Casualty rates are exceeding anything in their recorded history," Reeves reported, her voice tight. "We're approaching a 15% loss rate on both sides." Fletcher watched the tactical display, his hands clenched. This was the moment of truth. Would they pull back from the brink? Or would centuries of suppressed conflict explode into total war? The answer came as both fleets executed simultaneous alpha strikes, unleashing their full arsenals in devastating salvos that threatened mutual annihilation. Energy fields warped space itself. Biological weapons targeted ship systems with terrifying precision, and antimatter warheads detonated in perfect, calculated patterns. "Fletcher to all vessels," he broadcast urgently. "This is the Federation Mediator, invoking Section 94-276, subsection Theta, paragraph 47. I am calling for an immediate ceasefire and withdrawal to designated coordinates." For an agonizing moment, the attacks continued. Then, gradually, the weapons fire ceased. Ships from both fleets, damaged and intact alike, began to withdraw, maintaining a wary distance from each other. "They stopped," Reeves breathed. "I wasn't sure they would." Fletcher nodded, his expression solemn. "They remembered what real war costs." Now comes the hard part. The meeting chamber on the Kepler Nexus had changed. The perfect dividing line between Zephyrian and Vraxian territories had been erased. The room reconfigured into a neutral space with elements of both cultures integrated, rather than separated. Ambassador Veltar entered first. Their normally perfect posture, slightly stooped, colors subdued. High Commander Zixith followed, carapace plates dull and still where they had once shimmered with light. 19 ships lost, Veltar said without preamble. More casualties in 5 hours than in the previous century of conflict. 17 Vraxian vessels destroyed, Zixith added. Crew losses, significant. Fletcher nodded gravely. "I understand, and I am truly sorry for your losses. But now you both remember what war really is. Not a performance, but destruction." "You manipulated us," Veltar accused, but there was no energy in the words. "I reminded you of what you had forgotten," Fletcher corrected. "Now, shall we discuss the future of the Kepler Nexus?" Reeves stepped forward, activating a holographic display. "During our time here, I've analyzed the strategic value of this sector in detail. The Kepler Nexus itself accounts for approximately 0.3% of galactic trade routes. Its resource value is minimal. Its strategic position has been undermined by hyperlane developments over the past 2 centuries. "What are you suggesting?" Zixith asked. "That you've been fighting over the equivalent of a gas station on an abandoned highway," Fletcher said bluntly. "Whatever value this territory had 473 years ago, it's long gone." Silence filled the chamber as both alien leaders processed this information. "If that is true," Veltar finally said, "then our conflict has been pointless," Zixith finished. "All those centuries for nothing." "Not nothing," Fletcher countered. "Your societies developed incredible technologies. complex diplomatic systems, and managed to avoid the kind of total war that might have destroyed you both. But somewhere along the way, you forgot to ask why you were fighting. He stood and approached the holographic display, manipulating it to show a new configuration of the Nexus. I propose a joint administration. The Kepler Nexus becomes a neutral zone, governed by a rotating council with representatives from both your peoples. Convert your battle station into a research center, a diplomatic hub, a place where your civilizations collaborate instead of conflict. Our populations would never accept such an arrangement, Veltar protested. They have been conditioned for generations to see the other as adversaries. Then don't tell them, Reeves suggested. Declare the battle a victory for both sides. Fletcher nodded. The Zephyrians secured critical defensive positions. The Vraxians achieved superior tactical advantages. Both sides demonstrated valor and skill. Everyone gets a medal. Everyone goes home. Deception, Zixith said, but without conviction. Politics, Fletcher corrected. The art of giving everyone something they can call a win. Over the next 24 hours, the negotiations continued. Fletcher and Reeves learned more about both alien cultures than any humans before them, discovering the complex honor systems and social structures that had maintained the conflict for so long. In turn, they shared human perspectives on conflict resolution, compromise, and moving beyond entrenched positions. Gradually, a framework emerged. The Kepler Nexus would be declared a joint scientific and cultural exchange center. Both empires would maintain nominal sovereignty over their traditional territories, but free movement would be established between them. A council composed of representatives from both species would administer the station itself. There is one more matter, Veltar said as they finalized the agreement. Our military commands. They have built their entire structures around this conflict. Fletcher nodded. Redirect them. The same ships that patrol your borders can escort merchants, explore new territories, protect against genuine threats. The same strategic minds that planned battles can plan infrastructure, research initiatives, cultural exchanges. It will not be easy, Zixith warned. 5 centuries of tradition does not change overnight. No, Fletcher agreed, but it can begin overnight. The signing ceremony took place in the central chamber of the Kepler Nexus, broadcast simultaneously to both Zephyrian and Vraxian worlds. Ambassador Veltar and High Commander Zixith stood side by side at a shared podium. The flags and sigils of both empires displayed with equal prominence. Today marks a historic transformation, Veltar announced. After centuries of honorable conflict, the Zephyrian Collective has achieved its strategic objectives. The Vraxian Imperium has likewise secured its primary military goals, Zixith continued, through the valor of our forces and the wisdom of our traditions. Together, they outlined the new arrangement, each carefully emphasizing the elements that would sound like victory to their respective populations, while downplaying the unprecedented level of cooperation the agreement actually entailed. Fletcher and Reeves stood to the side, observing the masterful political performance. They're good at this, Reeves whispered. 5 centuries of diplomatic protocol, Fletcher replied. They should be. After the ceremony, in a private chamber, the 4 principals shared a moment of genuine connection. Your intervention was unorthodox, Captain Fletcher, Veltar said, but effective. The Federation's approach to conflict resolution is unlike anything in our diplomatic archives. Zixith added. Abrupt, even crude by our standards. But I cannot argue with the results. Fletcher smiled. Sometimes the most important question is the simplest. What are you fighting for? If you can't answer that clearly, perhaps you shouldn't be fighting at all. A lesson our peoples will not soon forget, Veltar agreed. 6 months later, Fletcher and Reeves stood on the observation deck of another diplomatic vessel, this one orbiting the contested moons of the Andromedan Alliance. 3 hours, Reeves said, checking her chronometer. That's how long it took to resolve the Andromedan trade dispute. A new record. Fletcher nodded. And 2 days for the Centauri succession crisis. Even the Outer Rim resource war only took a week. Word has spread, Reeves said. The humans who ask inconvenient questions and don't respect thousand-page protocols. Good, Fletcher replied. Maybe we can put ourselves out of a job. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the stars. Below them, representatives from 6 different species were signing an agreement that would end a conflict before it could begin, all because someone had asked them what they really wanted. Do you think it will last? Reeves asked suddenly. The peace at the Kepler Nexus? Fletcher considered the question. I received a communication from Veltar yesterday. The Joint Research Initiative has already produced breakthroughs in crystalline computing. Zixith reports that cultural exchanges have begun between their younger populations. He turned from the viewport to face his colleague, his expression thoughtful. We didn't give them peace, Alex. We just reminded them to ask why they were fighting. The real work, the building of something new, that's up to them. Reeves nodded. And all it took was one simple question. The right question, Fletcher corrected with a smile. Sometimes that's all it takes to end any war, even one that's lasted for 473 years. As their ship prepared to depart for the next mission, Fletcher found himself thinking about the Kepler Nexus, now transformed from a symbol of endless conflict to a beacon of collaboration. Perhaps there was hope for the galaxy yet, one inconvenient question at a time. The end.